Today we're going to talk about Zmanim, about times of day. In order to talk about it, we have to talk about a couple of Gemaras. In Psachim and in Shabbos. Gemara Psachim has a machlokas between the Chachmei Yisrael and the Chachmei Uros, between the Jewish sages and the non-Jewish sages. It's an interesting term because we really don't find very often the term Chachmei Yisrael. And it may refer not necessarily to Chazal, but to astronomers. And the astronomers of the Jews, the astronomers of the non-Jews had a machlokas. Where does the sun go at night? The Jewish astronomers, or Chazal, depending on how you learn it, the Jewish astronomers held that at night the sun goes behind the dome, meaning that during the day the sun goes beneath the dome from east to west, then at night it goes up behind the dome, goes behind the dome from west to east, comes back down under the dome in the morning. Okay?
What dome?
The dome, the Sheki'ah. It's mentioned in the second day of creation. Okay? That's what the Gemara says. Gemara says that was opinion of Chachmei Yisrael. It's also brought down in the Yerushalmi. And in fact, this dome has 365 windows on each side because I think actually it's 365 windows because the sun, if you notice, every day comes up in a slightly different place, depending on the season and the time of year. Every day, the sunrise and sunset are in slightly different places. So there's 365 windows on each side. And the sun comes through the dome, comes through one of those windows every morning and exits another window every night. The Chachmei Umos, the astronomers of the nations of the world, they say no. They say the sun at night goes around the bottom of the earth and comes up the other side. In other words, there is no dome, or if there's a dome, it doesn't really matter. The sun remains under the dome and goes around during the course of the night to come back the other side. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says it seems that the Chachmei Umos are correct, that the sages of the nations of the world are correct. Why? Because in the morning you find that if you go to a spring, the earth around the spring is cold, and the spring itself is warm. How does the spring get warm if the earth is cold? It must be because the sun went around the bottom of the earth at night, heated up the springs from the bottom, and therefore, when you get up in the morning, you found that the springs are warmer than the surrounding earth. That Gemara also says that how long is a day? It's a machlokas. Everybody agrees that from dawn till nightfall, it's the amount of time it takes a person to walk 40 mil. A mil is 2,000 amos. 2,000 amos is about 3,000 feet. 3,000 feet times 40 equals 120,000 feet. 120,000 feet, if there are about 6,000 feet approximately in a mile, it's really 5,280. So there is approximately a little bit over 20 miles a person can walk in the course of a day. Not run or walk quickly, but walk casually. And that's from sunrise, absolute dawn to absolute nightfall. Then the Gemara has a machlokas. How long is the gap between dawn? And dawn means when the first light is perceptible over the eastern horizon, and sunrise. And how long is it between sunset and absolute nightfall when the last light is perceptible over the western horizon? So according to one opinion, it is the amount is 4 mil. The amount takes to make walk 4 mil, which is again 8,000 amos, approximately 12,000 feet. According to another opinion, it's 5 mil. The amount it takes to walk 5 mil, which is a little bit more. So those are the numbers given in Psachim. In Shabbos, where it talks about the end of Shabbos, the Gemara is very different. The Gemara says, when does Shabbos end? The Shabbos end the amount it takes to walk a half mil after sunset, meaning 1,000 amos. The amount it takes to walk 2/3 of a meal after sunset, which means whatever. What?
You said it was 1,000, so 2/3 of 600.
2/3 of 2,000 amos, which would be 1667 amos, and another opinion is 3/4, which would be 1750. Then there's another opinion that Bein Hashmashos, the time between sunset and the darkness, well, although it's not clear that this starts at sunset itself, could start after the other times which are given there, is clarifying. It's like the blink of an eye. But the thing is, in Tanakh Chazal, they blink eyes very slowly. So the blink of an eye in Chazal defines the amount of time it takes to walk 50 amos. Okay? 75 feet. Okay? So that's the blink of an eye.
Where is that defined?
What?
The blink of an eye.
Shabbos Daf Lamed Daled.
Okay, so we're in the same place.
What?
Same place.
Yes. Yes. So there's a major question here is if Shabbos ends, the amount of time it takes to walk a meal, not even a meal, half a meal, a quarter of a meal, 3/4, half a meal, 2/3 a meal, 3/4 a meal, after Shabbos ends, that's way before, after sunset, that's way before what the Gemara in Psachim calls Tzeis HaKokhavim. The Gemara says absolute nightfall, because the Gemara in Psachim says absolute nightfall is 4 or 5 meal after sunset, which means either 8 or 10 times the minimum shiur which is given in Shabbos of half a meal. So how do you reconcile these two Gemaras? This is a very big issue. So there are two major ways of reconciling the Gemara. One way of reconciling the Gemara is that of Rabbeinu Tam. And this is where the idea of Rabbeinu Tam's Sheki'ah comes from.
He has a question for you after. Because that's consolidating the parts. That's
Not really relevant.
Okay? Rabbeinu Tam says that in order to reconcile the Gemaras, we have to say like this, that when the sun, he goes with the dome idea, and he says when the sun on the western side goes beneath the horizon, it starts traveling outwards, meaning along the bottom of the dome. And then when it reaches the back of the dome, it starts curving up and going back to the east. He says there are two Sheki'ahs, there are two sunsets. The first sunset is when the sun goes beneath the horizon, and the second sunset is when the sun starts going up above, around the top of the dome. He says that the 4 meal or 5 meal minus the half meal or 2/3 of a meal, 3/4 of a meal, which are mentioned in Shabbos, is the time it takes to traverse the dome. That was to go straight out. And that extra meal, half meal, 2/3 of a meal, 3/4 of a meal, is the amount of time it starts going. It has to start going up around the back of the dome until Tzeis HaKokhavim, until absolute nightfall. So again, according to Rabbeinu Tam, there are two Sheki'ahs. The first Sheki'ah, the first sunset, is when you see the sun go beneath the horizon. But then the sun is going straight out. It hasn't yet started going back around the dome. Only once it starts going back around the dome can we start counting an additional amount of time based on, we understand the Gemara of Shabbos, half a meal, 2/3 of a meal, 3/4 of a meal, until we can officially declare Shabbos is over and it's absolute nightfall. You with me on this so far? Now, the other opinion is the sheet of the Gaonim, the approach of the Gaonim, and the approach of the Gaonim says there is no dome. There is no dome, and they hold like the Chachmei Umos, like the astronomers in the nations of the world. And therefore there are no two Sheki'ahs, because the sun just goes round and round and round. So they say, how do they reconcile the two Gemaras? They say there are two separate definitions of nightfall. There's nightfall when Shabbos ends, and there's nightfall when it's absolutely dark. Shabbos ends at the time of half a meal, 2/3 of a meal, 3/4 of a meal, after the first and only sunset. Absolute darkness is only later, when the sun starts going behind. Not that. When the sun goes a certain amount of degrees beneath the horizon, at that point there's absolute darkness. Now, the amount of time, if it's four meal, then that's understood to be in degrees 16.1 degrees beneath the horizon. If it's 5 meal, that's understood to be 19.8 degrees beneath the horizon. Now, we have so the Gaonim say there is no such thing as a second Sheki'ah, because it keeps going on, down underneath. Based on this, we've had a tremendous machlokas in Am Yisrael for hundreds and hundreds of years. When can you stop davening mincha? According to Rabbeinu Tam, the first Sheki'ah is meaningless. When the sun starts going back around the dome, it makes no difference to us. It has no halachic significance. When does it start? When is Sheki'ah? The second Sheki'ah. When it starts going back around the dome. That 1 second. That is why Hasidim to this very day are willing to daven mincha with no apparent sense of guilt until an hour, approximately an hour. It's about 58.5 minutes. But approximately an hour after our sunset. Because according to them, the sun will not set, actually, halachically, for another 58.5 minutes. Yes?
So, the first Sheki'ah, according to Rabbeinu Tam, is when the form of the, I'm just trying to confirm, the form of the sun dips below the horizon. And then the second Sheki'ah is what? When the light goes away?
The second Sheki'ah is when the light starts going away at the first Sheki'ah.
Right.
But it's halachically insignificant. The real sunset, which is halachically significant, is when it starts going up behind the dome.
Right. And how's that calculated? Is it just like a degree where it goes around here? It's a certain time?
No, it's the 4 meal.
Right.
The 4 meal is the amount of 4 or 5 meals, the amount of time behind the dome that it's going to actually be considered fully dark. Yes.
When is it that they figured out that the sun doesn't go around the Earth?
That the sun doesn't go around the earth? Who says it doesn't?
NASA.
It's everything is relative. So somebody is standing.
The movement is relevant.
Right,
I'll
exactly.
agree with you, but
That's what Babich Rebbe is big Kiddush. He says that there's no reason to say the sun goes around the earth or the earth goes around the sun because it all depends on your vantage point. There's truth to that.
it is.
Yeah.
But is that what they were speaking of?
They were assuming that, they assumed that the sun went around the earth.
Right.
Literally, but it doesn't matter for all intents and for halachic purposes.
Did that ever change?
No.
Why?
That's because no Navi came down and told us to change that assumption. Now, it doesn't make a difference in halacha. There's no practical ramification. So you can believe whatever you want. So it's just because they assumed that the sun goes around the earth doesn't mean it has to go around the earth. Science and halacha complement each other, but they're not congruent with each other. Got that? Okay. So now, getting back to this distinction. So, according to Rabbeinu Tam, Shabbos is not over until the amount of time it takes to walk that 4 or 5 meal, and Shabbos only begins to be over. We enter twilight approximately after our sunset, when the second sunset takes place. According to the Gaonim, Shabbos ends very, very shortly after sunset. The amount of time it takes to walk 2/3 or a half or 2/3 or a 3/4 of a meal. Now, let's make this clear. 1 second, let me just make one more point, which is that how long it takes to walk a meal is a big problem. Okay? We don't know how long it takes to walk a meal, so we have to estimate. Yes?
Why did, just interesting, Rabbeinu Tam lived quite a while after the day.
Yes.
So, obviously, presumably people had that one opinion, and he just, made a chiddush, or what? Is it based on some previous opinion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was obviously it wasn't made in Europe, and the reason, my theory, my hypothesis, I should say, why this was the case, is because in Europe, the Jews lived in such northerly latitudes, well beyond the northerly latitudes even of Toronto, Montreal, that in the summer it never gets fully dark. As long as you wait, twilight never ends. So therefore they have a big problem. How are they supposed to determine when it's actually dark for the purpose of calling it darkness? So they had to come up with a figure on the clock, and they had to come up with a late figure because twilight extends so long there, so much of the year. Whereas the Gaonim lived near the equator, so therefore for them there was no issue.
Whatever happened to Tzeis HaKokhavim? Is there any?
Good question.
Just seeing the stars?
That too is a machlekes. So the Gemara in Shabbos says that the siman l'davar, the sign that amount of time has elapsed, is Tzeis HaKokhavim when you can see the stars. So when we say 3 medium stars, what's a medium star? So the assumption is, although everything is subject to dispute, but the assumption is that a medium star is a not planet. In other words, planets can even be seen occasionally during the day. Small stars can't be seen till very late at night. But medium stars, meaning stars which are not planets, can be seen earlier. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, there are 6 magnitudes of stars. Actually, not going to Rabbeinu Tam. According to science, there are 6 magnitudes of stars. According to, if you go by Rabbeinu Tam's Tzeis HaKokhavim, it's the time when the fifth, you can start seeing the 6th magnitude of stars. Because until Rabbeinu Tam's time, it's not fully dark. But it's dark enough to see all the magnitudes of stars besides the smallest and tiniest. According to the Gaonim, the time when you can start seeing the 3 medium stars is approximately 22.5 to 24 minutes after Sheki'ah, and in fact, in Eretz Yisrael, where twilight is much, much shorter than by us, that's when you will see 3 medium stars.
In Ottawa, that's 22 minutes after Sheki'ah is still
Bright light. Yes, right. So the further north you go, the less accurate this becomes. So the Metzias, the reality in Eretz Yisrael seems to be in line with the Gaonim, but the Metzias in France and in Ottawa seems to be in line with Rabbeinu Tam. So Jews in different localities experience this very differently. Now, getting back to the amount of time it takes to walk a meal. Today, we say the amount of time it takes to walk a meal is 18 minutes. And therefore, formula would be 72 minutes. And that's why Rabbeinu Tam's Tzeis is a minimum of 18 minutes after our sunset. But that's probably not true, because the amount of time it takes to walk a meal is probably either 22.5 or 24 minutes. And if it's 22.5 minutes, that means that Rabbeinu Tam is not till 90 minutes after Sheki'ah. And if it's 24 minutes, so then the amount of time it takes is 5 times 24 is, no, 4 times 24 is 96 minutes, right? 96 minutes. And if you go by the opinion which the Briskers hold, you have to go by that it's 5 meal, so then it's 5 times 24, which is 120 minutes. So the Briskers, the true blue Briskers, don't own Shabbos until 120 minutes after Sheki'ah. Okay? At least 90, preferably 120. The thing is like this. The question is, when do we measure that amount of time? Is that amount of time true the year round, or is it only true at certain times of year? And this too is a machlekes. According to most opinions, the shiur of 4 meal from dawn till sunrise and 4 meal from sunset till absolute darkness is on an equinox day in the latitude of Eretz Yisrael. That's where it's going to be that amount of time. In other words, on a day, either on March 21st or September 21st. The rest of the year you have to adjust based on the different path of the sun, because each day the sun takes a different path, shorter and longer. So therefore, you have to take that number from the equinox day and extrapolate from it for differences in season. What? It's like Zmanim, but it's not the same principle as Zmanim. In other words, it comes out to be the same, but it's really based on the degree of darkness or degree of light, right? Not on the Zmanim per se. Okay. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says the 72 minutes on a clock makes no sense, because it should vary throughout the year. It shouldn't be 72 minutes like yeshivas do. But he says, really, he's never seen, at least in America, that utter darkness takes longer than 50 minutes. So the extra 22 minutes are there as a chumrah. And the chumrah, you don't have to actually, and he says the reason why we machmir, because in Europe, where people live further north, 72 minutes was legit. So therefore he says, but since we came to America from Europe, those who came to America from Europe, then we should continue to conduct ourselves according to that stringent standard. And therefore it becomes 70 minutes on the clock every day, every Shabbos of the year, even if it's not actually, doesn't make sense in terms of the actual length of twilight. It's like a low plug. The rabbi said that we're not doing any distinctions, it'll get too confusing. Okay? So, in fact, if you look at actual 3 stars, then it's around no later than 36 minutes after Sheki'ah. Now, if you look ever in Zmanim.com, myzmanim.com, you'll see that there
They
are.
have an app, by the way.
What?
They finally got an app like this week.
Oh yeah, they got it.
Yeah.
So they give various different shiurim about when that is, when you can see the 3 stars, because there is a machlokas between the Gra and the Baal HaTanya. The Gra holds that you start the half meal, 2/3, 3/4 meal, from when the sun begins to set. The Baal HaTanya holds no, because it takes about 4 minutes for the sun to set. And then, what?
Have the third meal?
What?
Chabad isn't the actual shiur.
What?
I made a joke. I said, do they even have a third meal?
Oh,
Because Chabad doesn't.
third
they
meal.
only
I got it.
use
Oh,
those.
very cute. So they start 4 minutes later, and the degree, those amount of degrees beneath the horizon are 4.81 versus 5.95 degrees beneath the horizon. And then there is the sheet of Rabbi Tukachinsky. Rabbi Tukachinsky was a Rav in Yerushalayim who went up to the highest building in Yerushalayim, which was at the time 3 stories high. It's still there. The building's still there. It's in Machne Yehuda. It's a building which has a shul on the bottom level and has a sundial on the side of the building. And he stood there and looked eastwards to see when the sun rose. And he recorded it every day when the sun rose. So his is a little bit later than the Baal Tanya's. So the one which is closest to actually seeing 3 medium stars, it's not so simple. Because Professor Leo Levy, who died this past year, was one of the great experts in the field, said, there is a time when you see 3 stars if you are an expert astronomer, you know where to look. There's a time when you see 3 stars if you are an average guy. And there's a time when you see 3 stars if you're a numbskull. So the question is, who do we go by? Do we go by the experts? Do we go by the average people? Do we go by the numbskulls? The Pashut shall be go by the numbskulls, because we're going to go trying to determine how people will know when Shabbos is over, so we probably have to account for the numbskulls.
Not by the average person.
What?
Not by the average person?
No,
Bothers me.
That's all right. No.
right? But the way it comes out,
I would agree with.
the way it comes out is that the average person is approximately the time of the Baal Tanya, and the numbskull is approximately the time of Rav Tukachinsky. Okay, so it's like a 2-minute difference.
Time of the ground.
Exodus, no, it doesn't get that early. At least not in our latitudes. Okay, so in Eretz Yisrael, now, which I should say one other thing here, which is that the question therefore is not just when to end Shabbos. The question is obviously when you can start putting on tefillin, saying Shema in the morning as well. Now there the standards are different because at night we can say that even though the absolute darkness is later, Shabbos ends when it's a certain degree of darkness which is reached, right? Sorry, yeah. But in the morning, there is no middle time like that, except for putting on talis and tefillin. The time for putting it the other times are either dawn or sunrise. Okay, so therefore any halacha which has to do with morning, you say at least b'di'evet if you do it after dawn. So dawn, this causes the chumrah which is involved in this is that if you're fasting, it's a fast day which starts in the morning, it starts at dawn. So you're never going to have a 12-hour fast because it always starts at dawn and then ends. Whatever the shiur is from Motzei Shabbos is certainly good enough for Tainus Arana. You could be even more makel. But in any event, you're never going to end up fasting from sunrise till sunset. It doesn't work that way. So the question is how to determine when dawn is. Now, the Rambam says, and this is a strange thing, but he says that dawn is always 72 minutes before sunrise. whatever you hold yeah about the end of Shabbos, the end of the day, dawn is 72 minutes before sunrise. So what people do is either they go 72 minutes on the clock, or they adjust it for time of year and latitude. When you see a Zman posting the yeshiva, usually, for the beginning of a fast, it's 72 minutes on the clock before sunrise. I personally don't think that's tenable, because it doesn't make sense to be the same every single day. But nevertheless, that is the time which you'll see posted on in most places. I think you should start the fast, and this is how I work it, is by going, taking around 72 minutes, which is 16.1 degrees beneath the horizon, and applying it each day based on the 61.1 degrees beneath the horizon for that day. So in other words, if in the summer, it's going to be lighter earlier and for a longer period of time. So therefore, you're going to have to start your fast earlier. In the winter, it's going to be lighter for much quicker, and for a shorter amount of time is going to elapse. So therefore, you need to start your fast later. So that is at the beginning of the day. In terms of any mitzvah which is supposed to be done during the day, even though it's preferable to do it after sunrise, you're yotze if you do it from the time of dawn. Again, dawn means when the first light is perceptible in the eastern sky.
Why don't we just look? What do we have to know about times? Just look. If you perceive the sun, then do it.
Yes, that was true in the good old days when people actually looked at the sky.
I mean,
People are not looking at the sky anymore. People don't even know how to look at the sky. They wouldn't know, there's too much ambient light in most places where we live for us to be able to distinguish between pre-dawn and post-dawn.
I'm saying that's only true the past, since electricity was invented.
Yeah, well, no, since street lighting was invented.
Right.
300 years ago.
No. What?
That's much less light.
No,
to be fair.
that's a lot less light.
What?
It's a lot easier with gas lighting. It's a lot easier to look at the sky versus
Maybe, I don't know, but there certainly was street lighting.
I'm saying it seems like they're having discussions about exact times much earlier in a time when it doesn't seem to be during this.
Right, so you have raised that point, and this is something which the Rambam actually says. There is this concept of starting Shemona Esrei precisely at sunrise. And there's some places where they have that tefillah called tefillah kivasikin, timed to start not just on the minute, but on the second, right, of sunrise. Well, the Rambam the Rambam said way back when they didn't have electronic clocks, and there were many cloudy days. So the question is, how do you know when sunrise is to exactly start Shemona Esrei? So the Rambam says, starting exactly at sunrise. It doesn't mean exactly at sunrise. It means approximately at sunrise. If I recall correctly, I might not be correct about this. He says, if you're 20 minutes earlier, 20 minutes later, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's still good. What?
Sounds like a Hasidic should be.
Yeah, but it was pragmatic at the time when there was no clocks, right? So therefore, yes, you're right. It shouldn't be as precise as we have it. But since we have the luxury of measuring time with much more precision, we do measure time with more precision, even if that is not necessarily warranted. Okay. Now, getting to the time of Toras and Tefillin, nobody knows when that should be. Nobody knows, because Mara has a few opinions. Mishiachim and Chelis Lava, when you distinguish between blue and white, Mishiachim and Chelis Takati, when you distinguish between blue and green, and nobody knows when that would be. Everybody who tells you they know is lying. Anybody who gives you a time is giving their own speculation.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't
we
tell.
have no set time.
We can't
but
tell
if you look
when
at it,
to distinguish between blue and white.
No, we don't know about blue.
Huh?
We don't know about blue. We don't know what white. We don't know what shade we're talking about.
it's dark shade versus a light.
Right?
But that's there's just a discussion on techilas in general.
Yeah, it is. But there's a separate discussion.
Yeah, but that stems from okay, fine.
What?
Oh, gosh.
So there was a person, Edgar Frank, if I recall correctly, his name, who said, it's for sure must be no later than 10.2 degrees beneath the horizon. Right? But nobody knows for sure. So the general assumption is, b'diavad, you say even from Alos HaShachar, from dawn, even in the case of putting on tefillin. In other words, you shouldn't put on tefillin until Mashiach here, but if you did, you're Yotze. It's certainly, and then the Shitas would say that therefore that b'shas hadchak you could start at 72 minutes. Really, it's either 60 or 50 minutes. We don't know, and some say it's 25 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So the Mashiach is a big problem, and especially in the winter in places where there are not just the winter, and they say with them also. In places like Detroit, which is at the end of a time zone, it becomes very difficult to actually daven in a normal way, put on tefillin in a normal way, because it's very, very late in the day. So in those places, the question, I'm not sure Jews were meant to live in Detroit, but assuming that, I say my wife is from Detroit, and I'm going there for Shabbos and Yitzhak Hashem this week, but I don't know if Jews were meant to live there. Tisha B'Av there is over at an extraordinarily late hour, but it does cause problem with time zones. When exactly you can daven in the morning? Place the end of a time zone. So, like in Detroit, sun rises well after 8 o'clock in the winter. So Mashiach here becomes a big issue. Okay, by us it's not such a big deal, but but in cases which are much later, it is indeed a big deal.
Go to work.
What?
How do they go to work?
Some places, well, most places in the United States have some level of Mashiach here before they have to go to work. If not, you have to put your daven and you put on film later.
Okay.
You can daven from Alos HaShachar, from dawn. You can't put on tefillin, tzitzis and tefillin until later.
Right.
Okay. So that's that would be what they would do. So far we've covered quite a few of the Zmanim. We haven't covered Zman Kriya Shema during the daytime, Zman Tefillah during the daytime. We'll come back to that perhaps next week. But I want to tell you, there's an amazing, for tonight I'll end with this, it's an amazing thing Moshe finds and nobody understands. When Moshe said he had a Masorah, he had a tradition from his father, that Chatzos, high noon, is always at 11:56 a.m. And his father said, the two halves of the day do not have to be equal. One half can be longer than the other half. And Chatzos is always at 11:56. So as long as Rav Moshe was alive, the earliest time for Mincha was set according to Rav Moshe's 11:56. Half an hour after that, because that's the time for Mincha. After Rav Moshe was nifter, they no longer, it's an extraordinary concept that you can have a lopsided day. Chatzos is always at 11:56. Again, nobody knows exactly where this comes from. I know, reading years and years ago when I was a kid, that, and I don't know what this means even, that a day is actually 23 hours and 56 minutes long, not 24 hours long. And this causes a discrepancy in terms of the calendar. But I don't know if this has anything to do with Rav Moshe Shita. Nobody knows where it comes from. Okay, you have till next week to come up with an answer. We'll stop here for today unless there are any questions. Okay. Have a good night. He has a question?
It's not about the shiur.
Oh, so I should turn off?
Yeah.